All right, let's get started. Just start off with just get some introductions. Really brief though. I'm Eric.
I'm Justin.
And we're gonna let Professor Martins take it away for some opening remarks.
All right, so yeah, my name is King Martins. I'm a faculty here at the University of Michigan Aerospace Engineering Department. And I'm also the chair of the Aero DI committee. First, I want to commend the student groups, Black Students in Aerospace, BSA, Michigan Aeronautical Science Association, MASA, and the Women in Aeronautics and Astronautics, WA, for starting this DI series, okay? The story was, one of the students, a couple of students showed up in the faculty meeting a couple of weeks ago. They said, we're starting the seminar series, all right? And that was that. So I really tip my hat off to you for doing this. And I'm really honored that you asked me to introduce this first event here. So today we're going to discuss mentorship, allyship, and sponsorship. And what do these mean? Well, first, to be an ally, you must recognize systemic barriers, right? And inequalities, microaggressions, and that marginalized groups are subject to. Allyship is really a constant effort to build relationships and to build trust. And support. It involves, among other things, calling out any inappropriate behavior, using inclusive language, right? And also raising awareness on unconscious bias. Mentorship is part of that effort in the allyship, and that involves listening and giving advice. Well, in that order, listen first, then give advice, solicited advice, right? And ideally, mentors have a longer-term role in supporting the mentee throughout their careers and development. Sponsorship goes beyond mentorship. Right? It requires champion people and supporting their careers actively. And sponsors are advocates who suggest they're sponsoring for opportunities they might not see, and to raise awareness, speak out on their skills and abilities, as well as accomplishments. So I think it's very fitting that we have this first event in DI series during Black History Month. It reminds us to be allies. And it's a chance for us to celebrate African-American contributions, look back at history, and also to understand how we got to the present, but also to imagine what we can do in the future and what the possibilities are, the work we have ahead. So speaking of the work we have ahead in aerospace engineering and engineering more broadly, African Americans are still very much underrepresented. So again, we have a lot of work to do there. And whenever I think about this topic of underrepresentation, I gravitate to a quote that I heard first from Dean Gallimore, and I couldn't find the original quote who it was from, but it said, talent is everywhere, but opportunity is not, right? And the opportunity is just a start. And that's where the mentorship and sponsorship, allyship come in, to continue that and take it to the end. So with that, I would like to introduce our moderators. So Eric is a senior here in our department and majoring in aerospace. He's a student researcher of the mechanical engineering department, also has experience being a computer consultant at the Duderstadt Center. He's treasurer of the BSA and also outreach chair for Manners. Apparently likes cooking and chili. Justin, he's also a senior here in aerospace. He's got experience as a museum technician for the University of Michigan and also MATSI 242 tutor. And he's outreach chair for the BSA as well. So take it away.
Yeah, now you heard a little bit from us. Now we want to really introduce our panelists, really amazing people. We're really happy to have them today.
So joining us today, we have General Robert Blake, who got his bachelor's here from Michigan as well. He is a distinguished graduate of the Officer Training School, and he got his master's in technology management from University of Maryland. During his career, he has been a mobilization assistant to director of current operations and has more than 4,500 flying hours in military aircraft. Some of his honors include the recipient of the Air Force Achievement Medal, the Air Force Commendation Medal with Oak Leaf Cluster, and Aerial Achievement Medal with 3 Oak Leaf Clusters. Also joining us is Miss Joan Higginbotham, who got her bachelor's in electrical engineering from Southern Illinois University, her master's in management and master's in space systems from Florida Institute of Technology, and an honorary doctorate in aerospace science and humanities. During her career, she was the director of open innovation at Collins Aerospace and a 9-year tenure at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Involvement in honors include being honored by President George W. Bush and is a recipient of the National Space Medal.
We also have Dr. Dexter Johnson. In education, he got his bachelor's from SUNY at Buffalo, received his master's and PhD in mechanical engineering, also from SNUY. During his career, he was a NASA Technician Fellow for Loads and Dynamics. He also worked as a Chief Structural Dynamics Branch at the Glenn Research Center. In addition to that, he co-founded FIDEX Enterprises, an educational development company that promotes STEM career exploration. And for some honors, he was a recipient of the NTA Technical Achiever of the Year, the NSBE Inaugural Celestial Torch, and the Aerospace Pioneer of the Year, along with some numerous other awards. He's also an AIAA Associate Fellow and a member of NSBE. Shout out NSBE, shout out NSBE. We also have Miss Claudia Fair. She received her bachelor's in aerospace and mechanical engineering from SNUY at Buffalo, and she received her Biz MBA from Rensselaer Polytechnic Institute. In career, she is the principal systems engineer at Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, an associate fellow at Lockheed Martin Skunk Works in systems engineering, and she has had engineering roles in General Motors, Raytheon, and Lockheed Martin. For some involvements and honors, she is in the National Society of Black Engineers, Society of Women Engineers, AIAA, Delta Sigma Theta Sorority, and Girl Scouts of Connecticut. In addition to that, she is the Palm Site Lead for Lockheed Martin's Women Impact Network and the chair of the AIAA Diversity and Inclusion Working Group. And lastly, we have Dr. Rickey Shyne. He received his bachelor's in mechanical engineering from TSU, Tennessee State University. He received his master's in mechanical engineering from University of Toledo and his doctor of philosophy and engineering science from University of Toledo. In his career, he's the director in research and engineering at NASA's Glenn Research Center and was appointed to the Senior Executive Service. He's previously served as the director and deputy for various NASA teams. And then in honors and involvements, he was a recipient of the Presidential Rank Award for Meritorious Service by President Barack Obama and the recipient of the NSBE Gold Torch for Career Achievement in Government and NASA's Exceptional Service Medal for Leadership. In addition, he is a member of AIAA, ASME, and NTA. Those are our esteemed guests. Now we'll start with the panel with some questions. I'll leave it to Justin. Excited to get into this, excited to get into this.
So now that we're finished with our introductions, let's get into the topics of tonight's panel. We know now, just by looking at your credentials, that you all are the picture of success. But we all know that success doesn't happen overnight. Sometimes it takes having someone behind you supporting you along the way to reach your goals. To aid in the pursuit of your goals, did any of you have mentors in your college careers? And if so, how did you find them? Claudine, would you like to speak on this?
Yeah, so actually one of my mentors is on a panel as well. So Dr. Johnson and I attended the University of Buffalo together. While I was an undergraduate student, he was pursuing his master's and PhD. So we would see each other in the halls of the lab, and I would ask him questions about, the work that he's doing. We were also both in NSBE. So he was one of my very early mentors, and I call him my big brother in aerospace. So once I graduated from the University of Buffalo, I went on to working for General Motors in Michigan and also Raytheon. So at Raytheon, I did have a mentor who happened to be a Caucasian man. We both were from the East Coast, so I was from New York, he was from New Jersey. So we had that in common, and that kind of started the discussion about, you know, he took interest in me, wanting to help me get acclimated to Wichita, Kansas. So he took interest in me, and I was able to ask him during a women's network event that Raytheon had on mentoring, similar to what you're doing now. I was able to ask him, you know, would you mind being my mentor? And it was a great relationship. He was able to introduce me to various people on his staff. He happened to be the vice president of engineering. So he had a wide network. He ensured that I was able to get into all of the trainings that I needed to be successful. And he helped me navigate, you know, some situations that I encountered that, you know, I wasn't sure how to handle. He was able to give me advice. He helped me learn, you know, when to try to work on different situations and when to, just walk away, because not every situation deserves your attention and not every situation deserves your presence. So there's times where you just have to walk away from a situation. And my mentor, his name is David Reamer. He was one of the first people who taught me that.
Excellent. Dr. Shyne, would you also like to speak on this?
Yes, good evening. My mentor, my first acknowledged mentor, really found me. I mean, I did not find them. And so that was one of my professors at Tennessee State University, Dr. Decatur Rogers, who was a professor at that time, and then later he became the Dean of Engineering at Tennessee State. Dr. Rogers was a very focused individual. I will use that word. And there were times when I was at Tennessee State, he would consistently challenge me. And his favorite statement would be, when are you going to get serious about your education? And so the way Dr. Rogers really found me, I think, as a mentee was one Saturday afternoon in the fall of my junior year. He called me on in my dormitory room. And back then we didn't have cell phones and we didn't have caller ID. So you had to go pick up the rotary dial phone to see who was calling. And he said, Mr. Shyne, this is Dr. Rogers. He said, I was looking at the homework that you turned in the other day for my class, and I was quite disappointed. He said, so I'm going to challenge you. And I said, well, what's the challenge? He said, I'm going to be in my office for the next 3 to 4 hours doing work, grading papers and looking over some exams and things like that. He said, so I'm going to challenge you to come over to my office and spend the afternoon with me redoing your homework. And I was like, really? I said, well, this is Saturday. I said, this is not a school day. He said, well, when are you going to get serious about your work? And he said, I will know if you're serious about your work if you show up in my office. Otherwise, you've told me what you're about. So I procrastinated for about 30 minutes watching the football game I was watching until halftime. But I ended up packing up my backpack and went to Dr. Rogers' office. And for the next 3 hours, we sat there redoing homework. And he had me doing homework, and he was pointing out certain things that I may have misinterpreted or just didn't comprehend correctly in this class. And that was actually a turning point for me, because from that point on, whenever I had him for a class, he would make me do extra credit for no extra credit. And I never realized what he was doing at the time. But once I got to graduate school, a lot of things that he was having me do as an undergrad were things that I was seeing in graduate school. And so he saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And so he really became my first official mentor. And then I was very fortunate when I got to NASA that I was able to have mentors in a number of different ways. And one of my mentors was my first supervisor, Dr. Lonnie Reed, who was also a Tennessee State graduate. I was also fortunate enough to have Dr. Julian Earls, who was a graduate also of the University of Michigan for his doctorate. And Lonnie was more my technical and supervisory mentor, but Dr. Earls was more my organizational mentor. He taught me what I needed to learn as far as navigating the organization, about looking at the organization in a way and figuring out how I was going to navigate the organization as far as promotions and other things that really gave me a greater awareness that what I learned in school wasn't just good enough to be able to navigate my way through NASA. And then I also had other technical mentors as I was navigating through my career who taught me how to be a very good experimentalist, who taught me how to do certain test techniques and things of that nature. So I've been pretty fortunate that way to have had a number of mentors that came into my life at different points. And many of them are still in my life today.
Excellent, excellent. I have a question for Dr. Johnson. How did being a mentee impact your work and school life?
Good evening, everyone. If I may, before answering that question, I'd like to take a moment and honor my mother, who is my first real mentor, my life mentor. She passed away yesterday at the age of 88 years old. And wasn't quite sure if I was going to be able to participate tonight, but I wanted to honor her because I wouldn't be able to do what I do and be who I am if it wasn't for her seeing a lot in me and investing in me and enabling me to be the person I am. So first of all, I just want to give honor to her, Miss Minnie Lee Johnson. But mentorship has always been a major factor in my career and in my life. And I learned from an early age and stage how important it is to have mentors. First of all, I just think back to also my uncle, my mother's brother, Dr. Roosevelt Thetford. He actually was he is a biochemist and had retired as a professor at Clark Atlanta University. However, he was a graduate of the State University of New York at Buffalo in 1972 with a biochemistry degree. And as an African-American, he was one of very few, if many. And so he provided in our discussions a great light and mentorship about pursuing advanced education, pursuing career. And I appreciate him. As I got into high school and college, I was a part of a number of programs that provide mentorship, and then there were opportunities from that where I spurned just independent, sort of organic type of mentorship. So I was in a program in high school called BEAM, or the predecessor to BEAM. It was the Buffalo Area Engineering Awareness for Minorities. So I was a junior high school, and it was the very first year of the program. It was intended to introduce students from the inner city public schools to the field of engineering. So I took 2 classes. One was Introduction to Engineering, the other was Introduction to Computers in Engineering. And so it was during the Introduction to Engineering class that we went through all the different types of engineering. And when aerospace engineering, was covered, it's like a light bulb went off. And I've been basically on that path and in that career track ever since. But specifically for mentorship, out of that program, one of the reasons why I ended up attending the University of Buffalo, because they sponsored that program. And I built relationships with the dean, Dean Lee, George Lee at the time. There was also Dr. Charlie Fogel. There was Mr. James Legge. These men and others really developed relationships with myself and other people that was in the program. And they really helped me along the way as I navigated through the undergraduate curriculum and so forth. So that really gave me a boost. I mean, just set me on a path to success. But then the baton was passed. I developed relationships with other professors. My heat transfer professor, he actually took note of me in a class. I got 100 on one of his exams. And he was like, I really think that you should consider graduate school or pursuing your education. And he put me in contact with Dr. Daniel Inman, who was my master's and PhD advisor. And he and they just continued to mold me, shape me, both technically and academically and professionally. And I owe a lot to them for my success. And certainly I carried that forward. So, and it's just like Dr. Shyne, and as a matter of fact, Dr. Shyne and I have a lot of commonalities in terms of mentorship and other things. And even himself has been a shining light for me throughout my career. But Dr. Juliet Earls, who was a center director at Glenn, played an important role. As a matter of fact, he came to the University of Buffalo when I was a part of the NSBE chapter, and like what you guys are doing here, he spoke to our group. And then when I got hired at NASA Lewis at the time Research Center, he opened his doors to me. He said, however I can help you. He invited me to his home, his church, and other things. And we have a relationship today. And I can name numerous other folks that have similarly helped me. But those are the primary ones that help propel me forward. But the key thing is I turned that around. And so I have been a mentor to a number of folks over my life. And you heard from one, Claudine, a little earlier. It's been spectacular to be able to help others achieve and grow and develop, see them become leaders, technically and professionally and successful in their life. And that's just a little taste. I certainly, could go on and on, but mentorship has been very impactful to my success. And I try to do a boomerang, effort to give back to others.
Thank you. That was really powerful.
I was gonna say too, we didn't mention it at the start, but if there are other panelists that would like to speak on questions, we have directed to certain people because they prefer the questions. But if you would like to speak on something, just speak up. We really want to hear from everybody. And if you have something to impart on the audience, we would love to hear it. So feel free to speak if you want to speak on a question. Sorry about that.
Moving forward, General Blake, was there a unforgettable lesson that a mentor had taught you?
How can you guys keep looks like it because the transcripts, I see the transcript at the bottom. I don't, my Air Force bio doesn't capture it as well, but I started off as an engineer. When I graduated from U of M, I was an engineer working for Naval Air Systems Command on the Harrier and the Hornet and various aircraft before I became an airline pilot, and then went into the Air Force. So there's two different unforgettable pieces of info from a mentor. The first was my first supervisor who became a mentor, and he carried it through, and it was about attention to detail. My second week at work, I needed to prepare a document for one of the leaders, and it got turned back to me so many times with red over it till I was just frustrated to no end, thinking this is not gonna, I am not gonna like working here. And eventually I got it, that the attention to detail was my credibility. And as that boss later became a mentor and a really good friend, he would draw back on that. And he was able to guide me and help me, because as he would try to help me out, he'd be able to sell people on the fact that, hey, this guy is good. He's not going to let you down. Look at the quality of the work he's putting out. And then one of the other ones, as I was moving into leadership in the Air Force, a mentor told me, hey, when you take over, you can really only go in with a plan to impact about three things. Look at people, operations, and resources, and get something that you think you want to change. The rest of it, when you're in charge, it's just going to happen. You're going to have to lead. You're going to have to figure a way through it. Your plate's going to be full. But if you go in with too many plans of what you're going to try to affect, and you don't focus on taking care of people and the leadership aspect, that you might set yourself up for failure. And both of those pieces of advice they've proved really effective in different jobs, whether it was engineering or in the Air Force.
Would anyone else like to speak on this subject? Okay. A question for Ms. Higginbotham. Have you had a time when a mentor provided sponsorship to you?
I did have an opportunity for that. So it happened to be my boss, well, a couple of bosses ago. And it was really interesting. I went in to meet him. And this was actually a little prior to when he was my boss. And we just had this organic connection. And it was just, we had so many things in common, both professionally and personally. And it was such a comfortable conversation. And when I went back and decided that this was a gentleman that I wanted to work for, because there were several opportunities on the table for me, I went back to tell him that, yes, I want to accept this job, but here are my career goals. And I said that one of the goals was basically to get promoted within the next year. And he was fully on board with that. And he said, I think what you have, what it takes to get promoted, I am all in. And so his response was, I'm going to make that happen. And within that year, that's exactly what he did. He helped me get that next promotion. And so to this day, I wish that I had more bosses like him. I had to move on. But he was somebody that was both a mentor and an advocate and a sponsor for me.
Very nice, very nice. Would anyone else like to speak on their sponsorship experiences? Dr. Johnson, Claudine, at all?
Yeah, I would like to speak on that. I was very fortunate. I had one supervisor who was actually 2 levels above me that called me in his office one day. And he said, well, what are your career plans? And I hesitated because I didn't know how truthful I wanted to be with him, because we were still working on our relationship. But he was really being rather open and honest with me and pretty transparent. And so he mentioned to me, he said, well, I think that you should consider management. have you considered project management or either line management? And I said, well, not really. I said, my plan is I want to go back and do my doctorate full time. He said, well, you don't need a doctorate degree in order to be a manager. And I said, true. I said, but if you have aspirations on wanting to be promoted at NASA Glenn Research Center, at that time it was NASA Lewis, I said, I need to have a PhD. And he said, why? I said, well, if you look at all the African-American supervisors who have moved up to a certain level in the organization, they have one thing in common outside of being Black. So they all had PhDs. And he looked at me and he said, that's not true. And then I start naming names and he said, oh my goodness, I had never thought about that. I said, well, why would you? I said, that's a reality that I deal with and other people who look like me deal with on a daily basis, but you don't have to. But what he did from that point on is he set in place a number of things to help develop me for what was coming next. So he sent me off to an executive development program at Penn State. And he paid for it out of his division's resources. I got back from that assignment. There was an opportunity to go to NASA headquarters. And he sent me to NASA headquarters to get more development and to expand my knowledge base about NASA in general, but more specifically about my aeronautics enterprise. And those singular events were fairly significant in help shaping me and putting me on a trajectory towards executive management, which I'm in right now. And so, it's interesting how, again, he saw something in me that I necessarily hadn't identified in myself. And he was willing to take a risk to engage me to see where I was at and if I was willing to sort of go on this journey with him. And, and thank goodness, God works in mysterious ways, but I was. Because it was a leap of faith for me to do some of the things that he was saying to go do, especially going to Washington, D.C. At that time, we had a new administrator who was a very interesting person at that time. But that set me up for some other things that happened later on in my career and created relationships with some individuals that have been impactful in my career as well.
Okay. Let's shift the focus for a
Yeah,
moment.
I
Sorry.
can just chime in here as well. With regards to sponsorship, I know some people may have the question, how do you get a sponsor? And the first thing is about performing. People want to get behind you and sponsor you when you're doing great work, right? So make sure you're performing the best in your current role. And then, sponsors will come, right? And they're able to open up doors for you. They're able to also guide you in wherever you want your career to be. But one of the key elements in getting a sponsorship is performing excellently, right? Because then people want to get behind you. They want to champion you. They want to share, all about your goodness to the world. And that really helps you in your career.
Very nice. I want to take a moment to shift focus to talk more on your experiences as mentors. And Claudine, I was actually wondering if you could elaborate a little further on how you personally go through the process of deciding who to sponsor in that case.
Yeah, so, I look for people who may I have a gravitation towards people who may be like underrepresented who may not be the, you know, the loudest person, because sometimes the loudest person or the person who's most confident, you know, gets a lot of attention. But what about those others who are not? They may have equally or even more things to say and more contributions than the person who may, you know, appear to have a lot to say. So when I look for who I'm going to sponsor, you know, I'm looking for passion, right? Because passion will get you a long way. It'll make sure that you work hard. It'll make sure that you are protecting your brand as a person. Who do you want people to remember you as? So passion is one of the things I look for. You know, dedication, commitment, making sure that you say you're a person of your word. If you set up a meeting with me, you know, I have, you know, other commitments. So if you set up a meeting with me, make sure you keep that commitment. And if you're running late, it's okay, but at least make sure you let me know. But, you know, I want to see, you know, mentees have, you know, something in the game too. I want to make sure that, you know, it's a mutually beneficial relationship. And interestingly, all of my mentees have, you know, the roles reverse, right? All of my mentees have taught me something, and it's not just a one-way relationship. You know, I learn from them, they learn from me. So never be afraid to ask someone to mentor you, because in the course of the relationship, you'll probably be helping them at some point as well.
Very nice. Would anybody else like to speak on their experience as a mentor or sponsor?
Well,
I
let
will.
me,
Sorry, go.
sorry, go ahead.
Okay, thanks. I say that for me, it's more of an organic relationship than it is one that is necessarily planned. So what normally happens in my case is I will meet somebody and there'll be just some type of connection. And then there's something that I see in the individual that makes you say, this person is going to be a star. So they just exude something. Maybe it's the passion that Miss Claudine talked about. And when it's a combination of those two things for me, I do whatever I can to ensure that person, first of all, gets exposure. So they're getting exposure to senior management, so they are known by the decision makers, right? And then I try to provide opportunities for those people. So maybe a stretch assignment or something out of their normal day-to-day activities. And then I support them, and then I look for others that I think would also help to support and accelerate this person's career, because that's what people have done for me. And that's normally, I probably have to say 9 times out of 10, how it's happened for me when I've decided to sponsor or be a mentor for someone.
I wouldn't have much to add to either of the two sets of comments. The one thing probably to remember as you're starting off your career and you're seeking mentors, and you might develop a situation where you have a sponsor, is it's not automatic. That to go from having a mentor to possibly that person sponsoring you, or someone sponsoring you that has never been your mentor, it involves work. It involves a lot of trust, and it's not an automatic thing. And I've had more than a few people I mentored that assumed I was their sponsor, and I was not their sponsor. And it's almost if maybe they had cursory relationships as, you know, mentor relationships, mentee relationships back and forth with folks, so many that maybe they weren't listening. They just heard they needed mentors. But on both sides, whether you're the mentee or being sponsored, or the sponsor or the mentor, you know, and you know when to take it to the next level, and you know when to trust that person.
I kind of have a follow-up question on that, actually, just to derail the plan layout a little bit. So in that situation, do you think it should be like an explicit conversation between the mentee and the mentor as they're moving towards sponsorship? Or is it like more assumed because people would assume, oh, he's my mentor, I expect him to sponsor me? And that's to General Blake or anybody who would like to answer.
That I think, and hope everybody please chime in. For me, it depends on the personality. Some people, you have that relationship with them and it's very explicit. And they speak to you that way, and they will ask you, and your answer will be probably just as succinct. Other folks, it takes a little while to tease it out. There's definitely nothing wrong with asking, because if they're a good mentor, they're going to tell you something you're going to learn right there. If they're not ready to be your sponsor, you're probably going to get some more mentoring.
Thank you for that.
Yeah, I think that's great advice, you know, because you don't want to leave it to chance. You don't want to assume that your mentor is going to be your sponsor, and they're not, right? So it's better to get to explicitly ask. If they can be your sponsor, then assume, and they're not able to be your sponsor.
And I would chime in to say that that's managing expectations. So as you develop the relationship, you just want to be on the same page. You know, it's okay if, you know, you don't have the sponsorship, but if one's assuming that and they're operating in a way that's assuming that, it could, you know, cause, you know, some, you know, issues later on. So it's better to, you know, be able to have that understanding.
Thank you. And thank you for the response in the chat, Ms. Levinsky. I did peep that up. Thank you. So yeah, that wraps up the mentorship, menteeship, and sponsorship section. So now I kind of want to shift to talking about allyship, which is another pretty important professional relationship. That can often be an interesting and tricky space. So I did want to pick you guys' brains on that. To start off, Dr. Johnson, what does allyship mean to you?
Yeah, you know, when I think about an ally, I think about somebody who comes alongside, who will be in your corner, that will go to bat for you, will look out for you. You might have blind spots. So they, you know, will be one to make you aware of that, especially if you're not conscious or aware of that. So I'm grateful and thankful for people who have been my allies. You know, someone who may have noticed either something I was doing or not doing. And it might not be a mentor, might not be a sponsor, but someone who's vested in me or invested in me and want to see my success. And they have, you know, given me some guidance that helped me make some minor course corrections and see and so forth. So I guess in my view, I see it a little more subtle than like the mentorship or the sponsorship, but still valuable. You know, having those allies. But to me, it all goes to like relationships. So you have different depths of relationships, and so having strong allyship is important too.
I think that's a really good point. Any other thoughts? Any other panelists? If not, we'll move on to the next question.
Yeah, I did have one comment to that.
Dr. Shyne.
I think it's important wherever you're at in your career that you develop allies, because allies can assist you in so many different ways, and you never know when those allies are going to help you deal with whatever situation it is. And so when I look at what I try to do within my career, I have allies not only internal to my organization, but I have allies at headquarters. I have allies at other NASA centers. Because there are times when you need all of them to help you resolve certain issues. So, for example, we're working on a lot of intercenter multidisciplinary projects that involve a number of different individuals with their own set of personalities. And times when issues happen, especially at the lower levels in the organization, because of the allyship that I have with certain individuals at other centers, we can resolve issues before it becomes a big conflagration. And so I look at that as being something that's tremendously valuable. It also allows us to be able to form collaborations and partnerships in ways where there's certain things that we can either go partner on, or either certain issues that we have a common outlook on that we can work together to try to resolve. So I think that's very important to do. And again, and that's regardless of where you are at in your career.
That's an important point. Thank you, Dr. Shyne. Kind of piggybacking off that, and the fact just what allies are and what they mean to you. What are some instances that allies in your life have been an advocate for you? Just to roll it off, could General Blake give your thoughts on that, please?
Sure. Well, 2 times it was really about the same issue. It was allies realizing when they looked around a room, that everybody in the room looked like them. And they knew that was wrong, and they wanted to change it. Both of them had the opportunity to get me included in, first time it was a leadership seminar. It was just easy enough. I was fairly young. I didn't think much about it. I later found out the advocacy that went on behind it. And the second time I had moved into leadership, and it was making sure I was on a development team where we were steering folks towards the future and guiding their careers. Both of these gentlemen as allies just sort of took that upon themselves. They realized, you know what, this isn't right. And both equally impactful for me, but for all the other people it touched. Some just knowing that you could end up at that event. They were, I still get people surprised at one of them that, hey, wow, you were at the development team? I didn't think they let us go. To not belabor the point, those are the two incidents over.
Thank you. Also, Claudine, do you have any thoughts you'd like to speak on this?
Yeah, one incident that comes to mind is I was working with a superior, and for whatever reason, he had his mind set on something which was not the most correct solution. And for whatever reason, I could not get through to him that, this was not the right way to go. So I was able to lead on one of my peers, who I consider an ally. And I said, I've tried to explain this multiple times to him. Can you touch base with him? Here are the facts, et cetera. And I was able to link on that ally to have him talk to the supervisor and help him understand the better solution that I was proposing.
I think it's very interesting, like how a lot of times these allies just help you get into spaces that people wouldn't normally let you in. So I think that's a really good point for people to just take from allyship in general. We just talked about the more positive sides of allyship. But one thing I want to talk about was how do you manage discriminatory comments from colleagues and set boundaries? How do you decide when to address it and when to ask someone else to address the situation? Ms. Higginbotham, could you share your thoughts on this, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the thing. You have to figure out what you will and what you will not accept from your colleagues. And that to me is a personal decision. You know what your bounds are, and you know what you're willing to deal with. For me, if it's something that I deem inappropriate or if it's offensive to me, I'm going to address it. Now, depending on the situation, I may address it in the moment or wait to address it later, but it will be addressed because if it isn't, I think there's probably a high propensity that something will continue to occur. And I'd rather nip it in the bud before it becomes an issue. Now, in terms of figuring out if you should do it yourself or if you should enlist somebody's help, again, it kind of depends on the scenario. If it's a colleague, obviously, it's probably a little bit more within your comfort realm because you're peers, you're equal. And that's more of a comfortable situation. I think it starts to get a little trickier if it's someone who is 2 or 3 levels above you. And at that point, maybe it's best to engage or kind of bounce it off of somebody you trust, a mentor or a sponsor, and figure out the best way to deal with it. But I think overall, you really need to deal with something because I know, especially for me, if I let things fester, it would only get worse. So addressing it and making sure it doesn't happen again, in my opinion, is the best way to handle the situation.
I think that's a very tricky situation to be in. So thank you for sharing your thoughts. Any other panelists, any other thoughts on this question?
Yeah, I agree with Joan. I think that you have to, in that moment, make a decision about what's important to you. And there's been situations where in my career where I saw things and I just didn't think those things were right. So I'll give you one example that happened. So when I was approved by NASA to go and work on my doctorate full time, I went away and I was contacted by my supervisor, and he said, "Hey, we're going to have this important meeting, group meeting, and I want you there." And I said, "Well, I'm away at school, right?" And he was like, "Yeah, but it's really important that you come to this meeting." It's like, okay. So it turned out that they scheduled a meeting for Fridays, and I had a schedule where I didn't have classes on Friday. So I drove back to Cleveland and I went to this meeting. And I sat in this meeting, and they had been doing some organizational development activities, and they did a survey. So they getting this feedback out of the survey, and there were these comments, and I'm looking at these comments, and I was like, those comments are about me. And people were making comments that like I was getting preferential treatment because I was able to apply for the full-time PhD program, and they was off paying for my full-time PhD program. Now, I found that to be curious because the year before I went off to do my PhD full-time, 2 years before that, there was another white employee in my group that had done the same thing. So how was I getting preferential treatment where this individual 2 years before me had done the same thing? And so in that moment, as Joan said, I didn't say all the things I wanted to say, but I did say that, this is not right. And so after that meeting, I went to my supervisor, and then I went to his supervisor, and I said, he set me up. I said, he knew what this meeting was about. He never said anything to me about it before I drove all the way back here to sit in the meeting where people were targeting me with very discriminatory statements and very ignorant statements because they were really unaware of what was going on. And I said, is this the kind of manager that you want in your organization? And it was really interesting because then that higher level supervisor called both of us in, and I just told the supervisor, I said, you know what? I said, you've broken the bond of trust that I had with you. Well, I didn't know how to handle the situation. They didn't teach me how to do that in engineering school. I said, well, they didn't teach me how to do that in engineering school either. I said, but trust is something that I learned at home, that my parents instilled in me. Trust and integrity means something. And I said, you did not even show me the courtesy to let me know in advance what was going on so I could be better prepared for that situation. You let me walk into that situation and be hit cold with this. And I said, that was tremendously unfair. I said, so in the future, is it working for you? I said, I will always do a good job because that's what I'm wired to do. Matter of fact, I'm gonna do an excellent job. I said, but the bond that I have and the faith that I have in you as a leader, I said, you've lost that. And not too long after that, I actually went to work in another organization. And it wasn't purely because of that one situation. It was more so because of my research interests had changed because of my doctoral work. But that was something that, again, that needed to be addressed because he needed to know, because there was other people who were going to come behind me. They were going to look like me or either be other people of color. And he needed to know what it meant to be a good leader. And he was not demonstrating that.
I think that's a really
That's
powerful.
great advice.
You got it.
If I may, I'd also like to share something that I learned from one of my mentees. She taught me an acronym, SBIC, specific behavior. So SB stands for specific behavior. So talk to the person about the specific behavior that they did, that they demonstrated, that was derogatory or discriminatory. Then talk about the impact. What was the impact of their words, and what, not just on you, but on other people? What is the potential impact on other people? Because as Ms. Higginbotham said, these things have a way of perpetuating themselves beyond just yourself. So the last letter is C. What is the correction that you would like that person to take in the future? So I know, coming out of school, it may be intimidating to address these things, but they must be addressed because you don't want generations to come behind you and still have these same challenges. So with that, I leave you with that acronym SBIC. And again, I learned that from one of my mentees as a tool to address discriminatory or challenging situations.
Yeah, I also like that a lot of your answers were not just doing it for yourself or for your own, like that you've been disrespected, but really trying to help the people that come behind you, because it's not just us. At the end of the day, it's going to be people who are going to be in the spots just like you were. I think that's very important to just always be aware that, man, excellent answers, excellent answers. So question directed towards Dr. Johnson. Have you had to decipher between genuine allies and those who are performing as such? What was that experience like?
Yeah, because sometimes you have wolves in sheep clothing. There have been, instances that I've experienced where there are people who seem to support you or take interest in you. Maybe that would be a better word. But later you find that maybe they were behind your back, maybe not speaking the best about you or supporting you. They may have had other reasons for their benefit to appear to be an ally. In order to determine if somebody's really an ally or not, you may have to have some test situations and test conditions where you might expose them to different things, especially if you're suspicious that they're not really supporting you, that you kind of put them to the test in different situations and see maybe how they react, or maybe to use that your other allies, your own verified ally, to help you with maybe vetting them. As a matter of fact, I think of an instance really recently. I had someone who was, in this case, it wasn't like, it was more of like a subordinate or a person who was supposed to work alongside of me. And I found that even though that they did a great job technically, and they did a number of things to provide substantial support, there was this underlying, sense that I had that something's not quite right here at times, and I found out later that they may not have been a genuine ally. After they no longer was in the role for which they supported me directly, I found that their way of interacting with me totally changed. It at times became very cold and actually did not advocate to me or present me to other senior officials in the best light. It's almost as if they were trying to set me up for failure. And so that actually was very, hurtful. I mean, to have somebody to work closely with you and then seemingly, backstab you. But I did have a situation that came up where people that sort of took his place in supporting me, in addition to other people that's why we talk about allies who actually, in discussing some of the areas of concerns, and I'm being vague for good reason, they provided a level of confirmation, a level of support that indicated that what I was feeling, what I was sensing was correct. And so, a term we like to use sometimes, people throwing you under the bus. And so I had some of those supportive allies say, I cannot believe that, this person behaved this way. And there was something that we had to finish up on and bring to a conclusion. And actually where they were looking to trip me up, it actually backfired on them. And I had executive support and other support, which in the end, provided confidence to me, but also it somewhat justified that what I was doing was beneficial, and the route that they were taking not so much. So I'm rambling a little bit, but I'm trying to be a little discreet and trying to share that. But I am saying that I have seen that, and so that's where some of the things we've already talked about, having good relationships in general with people. Rickey talked about being trustworthy. So, people who are around you, they can trust you and you can trust them. But sometimes, you get those, little red flags about people, and sometimes it's worth, exploring and that a little bit. And so in this case, it's shown it. And I try to be a person that even if I am wronged, so to speak, or whatever, I still try to make sure I do right, that I still respond in a way that's going to be beneficial, to all involved, not to basically throw stones for stones or things like that. So that's the way I approached it. So that's just one example.
I apologize that I'm jumping in like this, but I'm going to end up having to get on an airplane here in a minute. And I wanted to leave one thing. Well, first, even before that, I appreciate the opportunity and the distinguished panel. I'm going to miss out on a lot of learning just from hearing from the other speakers, even with cutting off here a little bit early. But one of the questions was, what other resources? And I would say our network, our Michigan engineering network. First that, and then you're gonna start developing the rest of your network, your other coworkers, but your network is something that's gonna be strong and get you through, and you're gonna have a reputation with those people, and it will take you a long way that you have a strong network, and the Michigan name and network will start you off and carry you well. I appreciate it. I'm going to have to sign off or they're going to close the door on me. Thanks all and good luck.
Thank you so much for coming.
Yeah.
Thank you, General Blake.
Thank
you. Dr. Johnson, you were about to say something?
No, I was just thanking General Blake and safe travels.
Safe travels. Also, if any other panelists,
Thanks.
for any reason, feel free to log off. We are happy to have you because we do have a Q&A session coming up. But just in the interest of time, if you need to go, do not worry. You've done so much for us already. I'll hand off to my co-host, Justin.
Yes. So we covered a lot tonight. We covered mentorship, we covered allyship, we covered sponsorship. We now just want to open up the floor to our audience, our in-person audience and our virtual audience. If they have any questions for our remaining panelists, feel free to speak up and say something.
Sure. Oh, you put them in? Yeah. Okay. Oh, my fault.
Sure. One question that we have from the audience: what career goals do you still have? Sorry, that's directed to any panelist that wants to answer.
Okay, I'll take a crack at that. So I think the first thing is retirement. That would be nice, where every day is a charity. I'll be looking forward to that, especially I think over the just the challenges we've had working through the pandemic over the last couple of years and trying to keep all the balls in the air and making progress towards important programs that NASA is involved in. So I think that's one thing. I think the second thing for me is I do want to put myself in a position to have the flexibility to contribute in other ways, especially to African-American young people who are interested in science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. And so that's still something that I'm cogitating about, exactly how I want to do that. But that is something that I'm pretty passionate about. And then I think the third career goal that I have, and my wife has been encouraging me to do this, but I just haven't had the time to do, is sit down and actually write a book just on some of the reflections on some of the experiences that I've had in my career and in my life, and some of those life lessons that she thinks it would be good to catalog those and share that with other people. So for me, those are the three things. Probably the closest one of those that I've hopefully be doing in the next 2 to 5 years will be retirement. So.
All right, thank you. We have a question from.
Actually,
That's about to go.
yeah, if I could, I'd like to tag on to Dr. Shyne. He actually spurred a thought. You said the word retirement. A lot of my colleagues are retiring these days, and so I do definitely see that it's on the horizon. But the thing that I think about as that horizon comes is continuing to still build a pathway for others to follow. And so in my role currently as a NASA technical fellow, there's only 19 technical fellows in all of NASA. And I'm the only African-American. And as far as I know, I'm the first African-American as a technical fellow. I would love to see, more representation in that sense. And so I've been able to sit on panels and to, also take under me, I have as a deputy, one of my 3 deputies is an African-American. And so I want to maybe do a little bit more intensive, mentoring, pouring into, bringing the, those others along. But the thing is, I wonder sometimes if I want to maybe shift roles a bit and maybe work in another capacity that can, amplify that. I know that maybe a handful of years ago, there was implementation of what's called phased retirement. And so you get to do like work half time, but half of that time you would do mentoring and so forth. There's been pros and cons. I talked to people about that. And so, but it's something just to explore. But being able to maybe just shift a little bit so to be able to be a little bit more intensive while still working at NASA. Now, when it comes to outside of NASA, I do a lot of things. And a bit of my bio that was read, one of the things that I've been blessed to do is work with my wife on a number of different activities. Our business we have is called FIDEX Enterprises, and that stands for Passionately Helping Individuals Develop Excellence. And as part of my own personal sort of 3-pronged definition of what I do, I consider myself an aerospace pioneer, a reconciliation ambassador, and an excellence cultivator. And so, I want to be able to pour in along all 3 of those channels. And so obviously you can probably understand that aerospace pioneer, and do a lot of that in my aerospace profession. I hold and have held a lot of leadership positions in professional organizations like the National Technical Association, NSBE, AIAA. But on the side of reconciliation ambassador and also excellence cultivator, one of the things that my wife and I do is work on helping people with relationships and crossing barriers. And certainly the past few years, we've been dealing with obviously the pandemic, but we also have been dealing a lot with racism, institutional racism and social justice. And so one of the things that I birthed during this time is something called ROAR. And it's basically rooting out all racism and roar to soar. And so rooting out all racism to see our aspirations realized. And so when I get a chance, I actually share that on different forums, other sessions like this, I've shared that. But I have real desire and passion to see relationships on all levels, racial, across social economic lines, also educated and those uneducated. I mean, we see divisions in those areas too. And I've been blessed to do that from a societal perspective, from a faith-based perspective. And I really want to continue and build on that as I go forward. But it ties in terms of excellence, and in particularly technical excellence. And I hope to be able to take the next steps that would allow me to express that. And I'm blessed. My wife, I have to celebrate her too, Miss Philomena Johnson. She just finished her PhD. She's now Dr. Philomena Johnson. She got a PhD in higher education administration and leadership. And her focus has been on an academic environments that you have a lot of African-American women not advancing to the ranks of presidents and vice presidents. And so her research actually focused on that across our country primarily. And so she's looking to make an impact on enhancing the role of academic higher education women of color in leadership. So I just want to share that little bit in terms of my aspirations.
Oh, also congratulations to your spouse. That's crazy. So I did want to have, there was a question from Ashley Carmen, and this was specifically directed towards Ms. Higginbotham. So did you always know you wanted to go to space? Were you discouraged by anyone? And if so, how did you push through and end up going to space?
And so, no, I would love, like many of my colleagues, to tell you, I saw the first man walk on the moon and that changed my life forever and I wanted to become an astronaut, but that wasn't really my story. I actually wanted to work for IBM as an electrical engineer because I had interned with them for several summers during college, and I have a connection to a couple of the panelists because it was in Binghamton, New York. And so I'm very familiar with, we used to call it SUNY Binghamton back in the day. And what happened though is at that time, IBM was not hiring engineers, but they were going to bring me on as a sales rep and move me over to engineering later. And that's not exactly something I was thrilled about. And in the interim, NASA was gearing back up for returning the shuttle to flight. So this was 1987, and it was a year after Challenger. And so NASA was doing some heavy recruiting, and they recruited me right out of college. And I went to work for them only after having visited the Kennedy Space Center, because I honestly was not thinking about NASA. I was not interested in the space program. And I certainly wasn't interested in them after they had just had such a catastrophic accident. But once I went down to the Space Center and I got to see a space shuttle and I got to see the launch pad, I was hooked. I knew nothing about it, but I was all in for at least 5 years. And that 5 years turned into 20 years. And about the 9th year in, that's when I was selected to be an astronaut. And so I spent the last 11 years of my career with NASA as an astronaut. Were there any people that discouraged me? No, as a matter of fact, I had one of my bosses who turned out to be a mentor, is the one that encouraged me to apply to be an astronaut, because I did not really consider that was not something I thought was possible for me. And I think, to echo, I think what Dr. Shyne said, this gentleman obviously saw something in me that I didn't see in myself. And he convinced me to apply. I applied and was not selected. Didn't like that, went back and got more education and was selected. And that's kind of the story of how I got to be an astronaut.
That's pretty cool. Oh, we have a in-audience question. Yeah, go ahead, just speak.
First off, I'd like to thank all the panelists. This has been a treat. I do have a quick question though. So one thing that came to mind, as having all of you here, is the just plethora of experience. So one thing we're trying to tackle here at the department is ways to better the current state of DE&I at the University of Michigan. So this is a question to all the panelists. Is there one particularly effective method that you've seen throughout your career to really promote DE&I and make everyone feel more inclusive so we can have a better workspace and learning environment?
I would say, a lot of times you have to show the business case for those who don't get it any other way. So show, what's in it for them. Make sure you treat everyone with respect, but, I think this panel, is a great example of, what excellence can come from, the result of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and continue to showcase the successes. Don't let the naysayers overshadow your successes. Always celebrate your successes, and that'll help other people come on board.
I think that you can demonstrate diversity, equity, and inclusion on what you do and just not what you say. So let me give you an example. And this sort of comes full circle for me. So your dean of the College of Engineering, Dr. Gallimore, was one of my summer interns way back when, so that tells you how old I am. And the reason why that's important, because at the time when he came in as one of the summer interns, there weren't many summer interns that looked like me or Dr. Gallimore. And so, at times we have to be very intentional about what we do and how we do what we do. And I would challenge anyone to say that because we brought in people that look like us and the quality and caliber of individuals like Dr. Gallimore, that we were sacrificing quality and excellence in any way, shape, fashion, or form. Because consistently what happens is that if people aren't given an opportunity to be able to show that they're more than capable of doing the work and being a significant contributor, then the machinery as it's put together will continue to operate the way that it is. It will continue to be very homogeneous. It will continue to just move along like there's no issues or challenges. Even today, in my position, I still have to have the conversations with my managers about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And many people have gotten to a place where they think that we're beyond that as a country. But in several respects, we've actually taken steps backwards. And so it's something that you have to be very intentional about. And what I try to do is to do the work and just not talk about the work.
Excellent question from BSA freshman Elijah Simpson. Check him out on LinkedIn. But if other people have responses, please feel free to go. If not, we would like to allow all of our panelists to get a closing statement. Claudine, I see you unmuted. Feel free to go.
Okay, so the question was asked about goals. My goal is, in my lifetime, I want to see there to be a level playing field. I want to see underrepresented populations contribute to STEM and engineering in a manner that's representative of the population. So I challenge everyone, and a call to action for everyone is to, continue to mentor people. As college students, you can be mentoring high school students. Everyone has something to offer from a mentor and allyship perspective. I want, within my lifetime, to see the STEM workforce representative of the U.S. workforce. So the only way we're going to get there is by each one teaching one, each one helping one, et cetera. So that's my call to action, and that's my challenge to everyone here. Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Claudine. Ms. Higginbotham, any closing statements?
Sorry, I was trying to get off mute there. Yeah, there was one thing that I wanted to kind of leave with the students to encourage you. So one of the questions that we had as a panelist that we did not get to was what got you where you are? And so what got me where you are, I think, are the same things that are going to get you where you need to go. And for me, the first one was hard work. And studying hard, because an engineering or a STEM curriculum is very rigorous, and you're going to need to do your due diligence and study really hard. The second thing is that you need support. For me, I was very lucky to have support and encouragement and love from my family and friends. So have that group of people that will support you and will encourage you. I am a spiritual person, so it was through prayer that got me through the tough times. So whatever it is that you need to get you through the tough times, be it meditating, or if you're a Christian as well, then you do that. It was sacrificing, and this may be a little bit ahead of you guys, but I chose to put my career on hold for a portion of my life, and then I concentrated on my personal life. And the last thing, and it's most important, is perseverance. So after not being selected the first time to be an astronaut, I sat back and said, what can I do to make this happen? And it meant going back to school and getting another graduate degree. And that's what I did, and that's what made me successful. So the last thing I would leave you with is perseverance. You will need it throughout your life, and it will get you a whole lot of places. That's my closing statement. And thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you. That was powerful.
Yeah. Dr. Shyne, closing statements.
Yeah, I too would like to thank you for the invitation to participate in this forum. One of the things that I would like to leave you with is to be open to opportunities. I think if you talk to probably the majority of the panelists, they will tell you that there were things that happened in their lives that wasn't necessarily the part of their plans. For me, I know that early on, I kind of had my life and my career mapped out what I was going to do. And I thought I was going to be a lawyer at first. Well, obviously that didn't happen. But it was the opportunities that were presented to me that I was open to. And one of the things that my mother always used to say, you have to be open to God's will for you, because you don't know what that's going to be. And as you progress through life, there are going to be different things that are going to happen that may change the trajectory that you were pursuing to something that's different. And the other thing that I would say is that some opportunities are horizontal opportunities and they're not necessarily vertical opportunities. Many times in life, especially when you're pursuing a career, people get very interested in wanting to pursue the next promotion. But actually, maybe the best move for you is doing something that's a horizontal move as far as the organization, to expand your learning and to make you better prepared for that next vertical opportunity. So those are my parting words. Again, thank you. Thank you to all the participants on the panel. I've appreciated interacting with all of you, and have a good evening.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Finally, Dr. Dexter Johnson, would you like to give a closing statement?
Absolutely. I'll start off by saying thank you. DEI related event. It's also a pleasure to be on the panel with such esteemed panelists and many that I know really well. So it's the level of comfort interacting with them. I also like to once again say I am eternally grateful to my mother for what she poured into me and my father. I'm not leaving out my father, but my father transitioned about 10 years ago. But there's nothing like a mom, and I certainly give honor to her. But there's three things I'd like to leave with you. And one is that we should seek to be outstanding, not just stand out. In our current environment of social media and so forth, it's easy to stand out. You can get attention and you can be highlighted on a particular clip on social media very easily. But to be outstanding, that's another thing. And so when you are outstanding, it will over time bring you to the forefront and make sure that you end up on top. As part of that, I've carried a model, and as you'll see, I tend to have little taglines, but one is excel to propel. And so, you know, any particular spacecraft, aircraft, you're gonna have a propulsion system. And excellence is your fuel. Excellence will enable you to move forward. And whenever I've been blessed with opportunities to advance, it's because I have shown some level of competence or excellence or just applying my skill or whatever God-given ability I have, even if it's just being able to work well with people. That has enabled me to have the opportunities that I've had and to be able to excel as I have. And then I will leave with you seek, seize, and squeeze. And actually this has a little bit of what Dr. Shyne involved in his statement, is that one, you know, you have to be active. You have to be actively and proactive in your pursuits. Sometimes I've seen people that they're fine with status quo and they let things happen to them. But you need to be proactive and actually seek out, you know, opportunities, explore. You know, we gather a lot of opportunities when we just simply explore, being transparent, be willing to do something that might be a little different. And I found that that has worked well for me. When I've been open to new experiences and explore, opportunities have come my way. Now it's another thing to be prepared for those opportunities, but you know, at least you're getting exposed to those, and so that's the seeking part. And so the other part is seizing. So even if an opportunity comes to you and you don't take advantage of it, if you don't fill out the application, if you don't build that relationship, if you don't take that next step, if you don't stretch yourself, then you're not going to be able to grab hold of that opportunity. And then the last thing is to squeeze. Once you have something in your hand, you're in a position or you attain something, you have to actually squeeze the most out of it. Do your best in whatever place you're planted. And if you seek, seize, and squeeze, you'll make the most out of every opportunity that you're blessed to take. And so that's what I leave with you all today, that you would seek to be outstanding and not just to stand out, that you would excel to propel, and lastly, that you would seek, seize, and squeeze to make the most out of your life. So thank you very much for having me.
Yeah, we went a little bit over. Sorry to all the panelists and all the guests. This did run a little bit longer, but we got some great knowledge. Just to close it off, I really want to thank all of our panelists. Just to do what you did in your careers and then come back and impart this knowledge on us. It's just, you really didn't have to do it. And we really appreciate all of your insight, everything that you gave to us today. Moving forward, I know for me, this is something I can take a lot from. In addition to that, if you guys ever want to do anything, we'll be in contact with you all. We'd love to have you. Any other thoughts?
I mean, what more can I say? Eric put it very nicely. I mean, this was a very, very good opportunity to hear you all speak. I'm definitely gonna be walking away with something from this. I mean, just seeing where you are and having something to look up to. I mean, it's very inspiring. And once again, thank you for your time.
There will be other events. We will be open. We will be excited to do stuff with you all. Dr. Johnson. Other than that, feel free to log off the call. Oh, people in the room, yeah. Please clap too.
We also just want to extend our thanks to the other student orgs that helped us put this together. We had a little bit of help from WA, a little bit of help from MASA, a couple other student orgs. Just wanted to extend that thank you. Couldn't have made it happen without you all.
Thank you so much. Yeah, feel free to log off the call. We will be in contact with our panelists. This is a great event. We love to do more stuff with you. We love you all.